Shir Esr Koton. How small can an Esr be that it should still be considered valid? Pochs Mechabeya Posul. If it's smaller than an egg, the Esrog, it's not valid. Avadim Hu Kabeya. But if it's the size of an egg, Afilu Hu Boser. Shadayin Lo Nigba Perio. Although it's unripe, it hasn't fully ripened, kosher. V'mhoyogodl kolshu kosher. We'll see kolshu. But if it's very large, it's kosher. It's valid. Mishna Berura. All the way on the bottom of 237. Posul. Although we evaluate it, we say this is definitely a ripened fruit, but if it's less than the volume of an egg, it's not valid. Why? Because it's not meant to grow larger than that. That size is considered, since physically in its profile, it's considered the equivalent of an unripened fruit. But if it's the volume of a ripened fruit, which is minimally the size of an egg, it's valid. Ultimately, it has the potential to get larger. Kosher, when is it valid? Because we had this earlier. What about if it's in intense green and it hasn't ripened? As long as it's not green as a leek. If you have a very large esrog, you would carry it on your shoulder. That's how large it is. Preferably, you're supposed to take all the daled minim simultaneously. But if, let's say, the esrog is too large, you can't hold the esrog with the lulav, you take them consecutively, and ultimately you take all four, yotze, so therefore, even if the esrog is very large, and it's not possible to hold it together with the lulav, b'di'evid is valid. The esrog is hodor. Look, if your hands are large enough, the Gemara says in Yuma that there was a Kohen Gadol, that his hands were the size of, he was able to take the whole animal, a bull, up the ramp of the Mizbeach without a problem. That's how, depends how big you are, how large you are. Okay, 238. What invalidates the arba minim? Kol arba minim psulim begozel begonov. It's Mishnah. Let's say the lulav or any of the daled minim was stolen. Lulav agozel. It's not valid. Bein lefnei yush, bein lachi yush. Before it's understood. The Torah says, let's see, the first day it says, L'kachtem luchem yom rishon. So the Gemara says that you actually have to own the esrog. You have to own all daled minim. The first day of Sukkot is financially, monetarily, you must own the daled minim. So therefore, why when you borrow it from a third party, why yotze? So the Gemara says, because it's a matonam l'slavs, he's giving it to you as a gift. But let's say the person will not give it as a gift. He says, when you take it, it's mine, and I'm not transferring it to you, you're not yotze. What about the subsequent days, which are only midrabanan? Just had the Mishna Rosh Hashanah. If you learned the Mishnah at the table on Rosh Hashanah, it says Rabbi Yochanan Mezaka, he legislated Zeichel Migdosh that the subsequent days in the Migdosh they took the lulav all 7 days. It's a Torah. It's after the Churban, Zeichel Migdosh, to commemorate what they did in the base of Migdosh, we take the lulav daled minim for 7 days. Before, when the base of Migdosh stood, it was only the first day. Subsequent days, you have no obligation. Okay, so then the Gemara says lulav hashol, esrog hashol, if it's borrowed, even if the person doesn't transfer it to you, yotze, even though monetarily you don't own it. But what about if it's stolen? Stolen, this is a different problem, because even on Yom Tov Sheni or Shlishi, whatever it may be, it's considered mitzvah bo b'aveira. The Torah says any mitzvah that you perform, if its origin is theft, Hashem, it's tainted. Hashem says, I'm not interested in that kind of mitzvah. That what? No, it's just presumed. It's like the halacha is, I'll give you an example. The halacha is that, your own talis, every day you have to check the tzitzis before you say bracha. because you're not permitted to wear a talis, arba kanfos, without tzitzis. It's four-cornered garment. A borrowed talis, you have an obligation to put tzitzis on. It's called talis sh'ula, a borrowed talis. Okay? Now, so if it's your own talis, so the question is, but there's a chazokah, there's a presumed status. We knew at one time they were valid, the tzitzis. What do you have to check the tzitzis? The Ramos says you have to check the tzitzis every day before you say the bracha on the tzitzis, or maybe even before you put it on. So Mishna Berura has a lengthy discussion. Do we say because it's chazok asur lishtano, since it's not uncommon that the strings get caught on a chair, on a table, and they tear easily, so therefore the chazok itself, the presumed status, is not so simple that it remains intact. It could change very easily, because tzitzis can be invalidated easily by being torn. So therefore, you're not even permitted to, based on that principle, you're not even permitted to wear it. The other is that even though there's a concept of chazokah, but if you're saying the Shem Hashem, where it's a question of b'motzi Shem Shemayim v'atola, pronouncing the name of Hashem in vain, chazokah is not sufficient to rely upon. So since you say a bracha when you put on the talis, therefore you should check the tzitzis before you put it on. So let's you go to the Yom as a shliach tzibur, right? You have to check the tzitzis, where you take a talis, and when you get an aliyah, right? Today talesim shuls are in better condition than they used to be years ago. Talesim were disastrous. Most of them were possible. They were never checked. They were abused today. Shuls, they have a greater means. They have a hired person, a shamus, who takes care of these things. He makes sure things are right. So today it's less of a problem. But at one time, so the question is, why do you wear a talis when you get an aliyah? Why do you wear a talis when you go to the Omud? It's covered at tzibur. For covered tzibur, you don't have to own the talis. You don't have to own the talis. So therefore, you have in mind, I have no interest in acquiring the talis. So it's talis shula. Talis shula, you don't have to, it doesn't require tzitzis. But when in the morning, when you put on your talis and tefillin, there's a mitzvah to fill the mitzvah of tzitzis with the talis before you put on your tefillin. So therefore, when let's say you come to shul, you don't have your talis. You don't have tefillin. So the halacha is, the Gemara says, based on the principle of nechle l'odom 11 mitzvah b'mamon, a person, the owner would be happy that as long that his object should be used for the performance of a mitzvah, so we could assume with certainty that the person would give you permission to use the talis and tefillin. So the talis, he'd have to transfer it to you. He'd have to transfer you the talis, right? It's matana maslachsir, because the shul is not good enough. Because it's important for you to fulfill the mitzvah of talis before you fill the mitzvah of tefillin. So therefore, we need the principle of what? Matan maslahasi. There, the owner, although at now he doesn't know you're borrowing it, but if you would know with certainty, he would be agreeable, as long as you're going to put it back as you found it. So therefore, you say bracha without a problem. But there, you'd have to check the tzitzis. It's not a talis shula. It's not borrowed. That's considered you own it. But for the aliyah, for the omud, when you go, then. But it's not so simple because it's talis tzibur. If you'd borrowed from an individual, so that's a private talis. Private talis, it's not yours unless he transfers to you. You have a mind, you're not acquiring it. But what about if it's the talis of the tzibur, and you're part of the tzibur? So factually you own it. So that's the case. As much as you disown it, you reacquire it immediately. Because since factually you're part of the tzibur, that's the reason why the minig is by slichos that we started earlier, before you were able to say the bracha on tzitzis, that the one who says the slichos doesn't use the talis shel tzibur, but rather borrows a talis from an individual. It's a private talis. Because the talis shel tzibur is not simple. Because you're entering through a question, you may have to say a bracha, right? But it's too early to say bracha. But it's an argument whether you say the bracha at night or you don't say a bracha at night if it's a day garment. So therefore, people, they take the talis from a private person, so therefore they're definitely not obligated to say the bracha, because again, it's purely covered at tzibur while you wear the talis when you go to the yomut. You're not wearing the talis to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis, so therefore it's not a problem. It's not a mitzvah. It's not mitzvah. It's not the proper garb. It's not proper to go to the yomut unless nothing to do with the. No, because you own it. What about you put on your own talis to cover that tzibur? The Torah says you wear your own talis. Talis that belongs to you. You have to put tzitzis on it. So now you have to question whether you have to say a bracha, right? That's the whole discussion. It's another possible reason why you'd have to check it. Because, but the two reasons the Mishna Berura brings cites is because the chazaka is not a strong chazaka because it could change easily. Because not unusual that tzitzis become possible by getting caught onto something. No, it is. It's a weak chazaka. It's a weak chazaka. And the other is, even though the chazaka is considered sufficient, that you're not in violation of wearing a four-cornered garment without tzitzis, but for bracha, where you're saying Shem Hashem, it's not respectful unless you know with certainty that it's definitely kosher. That's why the tzitzis have to be checked. Belongs to the shul? No. The Gemara says in a number of places, or Megillah, Gemara in the Dorim, that if it's a communal synagogue, not in a village. A village is considered a private enterprise. You know, like you have a small town or you have a shul, there are few people, they own the shul. But if you have a shul which accommodates a community, like in New York City, that's called that's it is, that is. Doesn't make it still doesn't make a difference. If it's a private shul at somebody's house and you're coming to, then that's private. Then not. No. But if it's a shul that's considered public, to accommodate the public, anybody comes there, you don't have their special permission to come or whatever it may be, then that's called Tal Shel Tzibur.
It sounds like one of the implications of this is that, I guess as a member of the shul, my shul, I'm not just like a shareholder of the shul, but I actually have a partial ownership of the assets of the shul. Like I own a partial percentage of the palace, I own a partial percentage of the Torah. I own a
Right.
shares.
Correct. Exactly. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant what they make distinctions. The halacha says differently. Right. Correct. That's only if it's a private shul. It's private. If it's a private enterprise, so it's like a partnership. Partnership, you could relinquish your share in the partnership. But if it belongs to the tzibur, you still, unless you're ostracized. If a person's not ostracized, if you're part of the tzibur, it's yours. So as much as you try to disown it, you reacquire it immediately. I'm just saying this is the point Reb Yitzchak Frank makes. It is. And within the context of halacha, it belongs, the assets, everything belongs to the shul.
And the liabilities of the shul.
The liabilities of the whole community. Even though the Dina Malchusedina, there's Dina Malchusedina, which puts the burden on the ones who are maybe the board, right? Usually the board, the trustees, they're personally held accountable. It's not the membership, right?
You have to be a member of the shul, no?
No. If it's a shul which allows people to come off the street. If it's a private club, no, then not. You know, you have to be invited. You can only come if you're invited. That's not a basic shel tzibur. But if they allow people to come without any permission, come off the street and come, then that's called basic shel tzibur. Within halacha, you do. It has many ramifications regarding the dorim. First makes a neder. So the question is, does my neder affect someone else? If I have an ownership, I could affect someone else. If I don't have an ownership, the Gemara says it has relevance. The halacha is, if you find a discoloration on a house, it's a ras, so the house maybe has to be demolished. What about it's a basic knesses shel tzibur? It's not considered an individual, right? So it belongs to Klal Yisrael. It's that kind of shul. That even if you have the discoloration on the structure, it's not affected negatively by the laws of leprosy of houses. I mean, the Gemara makes all kinds of distinctions whether it's a partnership or it's considered Klal Yisrael's asset. Okay? But that's called, so all Jews have a right to be there. All Jews have a right to be there.
It's a public trust that has a board of trustees that can set rules. They can set rules that say, if you want to come here, you have to pay membership fee. you have to be dressed in a certain way. They consider lulav.
Okay,
Just because you're man of the street doesn't mean
but that's not, has nothing to do with ownership. That's, the Gemara speaks about Shiva Tuva'ir. You have a board of a community, and they can set policy. And the community is bound by that policy. But again, because everybody agrees that it's like you have a democracy. You have a representation in government. The representation in government is really the people. They represent the people. But who owns the country? Who rules the country? The people rule. It's because these are their representatives. So the same thing, the Board of Trustees, it's the members vote in the Board of Trustees. That's usually the way it works.
the government of the United States, on one of its ships, at Taliesin, at Nina, it belongs to the U.S. government. Would you say that I own it by this principle?
You have an interest in it. An interest. It's yeah, maybe.
When I go to visit the national park,
You have a right to be there. You have a right to be there.
I own the piece of land.
You can't sell it, but but I'll tell you, it's interesting. It's not simple. There's a whole discussion if you have an ownership which is poch mishov pruta. It's worth less than a cent. Is that called ownership? Is that called ownership? There's a Rashi in Sukkah. The Gemara says, how do we know? It says that all Jews can be yotze with one sukkah. So that's the proof that you do not have to own a sukkah. So Rashi says, why? Because if all Jews are yotze with one sukkah, well, that's being they all use it simultaneously. So if that's the case, what is the financial share in the sukkah? Definitely less than a cent. So from there you see that sukkah shula, the borrowed sukkah, is sufficient. You don't have to have monetary ownership in the sukkah. So I'm saying, so if you have all citizens of the United States own that particular asset, so definitely it's poch mishov pruta, right? It's not called, that's not considered ownership. So then it would depend also. So then we're getting back to tal shel tzibur. So if you have less than that, it's not called an ownership either. Okay, I'm just telling you. If you want to look at Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, he has a response on this, and he discusses it in the Mikroi Kodesh. He has a work.
The other one is gift. I mean, so I throw a gift into the Fort Knox, and I say to this woman,
No. They see that's why you're not a rabbi, David. You're a businessman. Okay? It has to be exclusive. No. For a domain, first it has to be protected, and it has to be exclusively that person's domain. It has to be exclusively that person's domain. It can't be anybody else's domain. So having an interest is not sufficient. Yeah, it has to be, at that moment, it's exclusively your domain. Okay? Before we have the Mishna Berura ends, he cites a smag. Kosa smag osla zalzul be'eser kshar mitzvah sh'aka mochrim. Smag writes, the species which are sold by a non-Jew, the esrog and the other shari mitzvah sh'aka mochrim, ad kan l'shono klomar shetzorch litin lemat yosem chdei demeyen v'lo harbe. Kidleel sif lametesiv zayin kavar sa smag dein lezal dato machshil osed lovo yivim pavacheres liknos miyodo. This is interesting. You have non-Jews like in Europe, even though there are all kinds of discussions in the Gemara, because a non-Jew very often is suspect. That the question is, where did he? The Gemara speaks about a hadass salesman or Oshana salesman. Shanas, the myrtle and the willow. The field may be stolen. The non-Jew may have stolen the field from a Jew, and as a result of that, it's considered gzula. It's stolen property. So the Gemara says, therefore, if you have a person who's a jobber, he actually sells the willows, the arovos, he should have the non-Jew cut the arovos and then give it to you. We understand a little bit why. Because when the non-Jew stole the field from the Jew, he already despaired. He had yush. But the Gemara says that yush doesn't affect karka. Fixed property is not affected by yush because it's fixed in its place. It's not an avedo. But what grows on it, so let's say the Jewish salesman would cut the arova, the willow, So it's an act of stealing. The Jew is stealing. But so when does the Yush take place? The despair only comes to effect after you stole. But let's say the non-Jew would cut it. The non-Jew cuts it, say he's the thief. He was a thief, now he's stealing the arava. He's stealing the willow. The moment he steals it, so when the Jew takes possession, it's already post-despair. Once you take something possession post-despair, what is it? It's hefker, it's ownerless. Therefore, it's not considered mitzvah b'avera. If the Jew would steal it, that means he would actually cut it. So when is it stolen from the Jew? When it's cut from the property. So therefore, the Jew's doing an act of theft. The Yush means nothing. The despair of the Jew is only taking place after the Jew stole. But if the non-Jew cuts it, the non-Jew's the thief. The Yush takes place immediately as soon as he cuts it. When the Jew takes possession, he's taking possession of an ownerless object. Okay, we're going to discuss this later. So he's saying over here, when you purchased, evidently we're not suspecting the guy is selling stolen property. If he's selling stolen property, you can't buy from him.
The Jewish thief steals
He's not the Jewish thief. He's not a Jewish thief.
the Jewish thief cuts the.
He's not a thief. We're concerned it may be stolen. Non-Jews were suspect. They stole property. Property originally was stolen from a Jew. So therefore, now when you buy it from the guy says, "Go cut it yourself. Go out to the field. You cut it yourself." The Jew should not. You should tell the owner, so-called owner, "You cut it for me and you give it to me." So if he cuts it first, the non-Jew, when you take possession, it's after despair has already taken place. That's the Gemara. It's Gemara Sukkah. Over here, he's saying, the non-Jew is selling a srogan, dalid medium. He says, pay more than you would actually pay. Why? Because if you pay and you give him a hard time on the price, the man's not bringing it to market. So you can have a shortage of srogim and the dalid medium. As a result of that, Smag says you should pay a little bit more, or minimally the market value, to encourage the non-Jew to bring things to market. That you should have the dalid medium available for the Jew. Okay, we'll continue the halacha tomorrow.